E is for elevator people. They never speak, and they cannot meet your gaze. There are 500 buildings in the US whose elevators go deeper than the basement. When you have pressed the basement button and reached the bottom, you must press the basement button twice more. The elevator doors will close and you will hear the sound of special relays being thrown, and the elevator will descend into the caverns. Chance has not looked favorably upon those voyagers into those 500 cages. They have pressed the wrong button too many times. They have been seized by those who shuffle through the caverns, and they have been treated. Now they ride the cages. They stare at the numbers as they light and go off, riding up and down even after night has fallen. Their clothes are clean. There is a special dry cleaner who does the work. Once, you saw one of them, and her eyes were filled with screams. London is a city filled with narrow, secure stairways. So writes Harlan Ellison in his alphabetical work From A to Z in the Chocolate Alphabet. In his entry for the letter E, Ellison not only satirizes a mid-20th century conspiracy theory, more on this later, he also plays on an ancient and primordial fear, the fear of that which lurks below us, under the bed, under the ground, down the drain and beneath the sewers. They are there, watching us and waiting to come up and get us. From Plato's allegory of the cave, to hollow earth science, to the shaver mystery, to H.G. Wells' Morlocks, and even the drow themselves, the fear of underground people and underground societies who secretly bedevil us up here is a universal one. And we're going to appeal to it and themes of urban paranoia in today's adventure. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today we're going to explore the domain of Zherisia, a Ravenloft Domain of Dread that focuses on urban paranoia and subterranean horror. As with all my Ravenloft videos, we're going to go over what this domain is, list some media to help us get an imaginative grip on the domain, and then sketch out an adventure. In our case, the adventure is a 3-act one, which takes PCs from level 5 through level 7. That is, they will complete the last act of the adventure while they are level 7, and with DM's permission at the end, level up to level 8. And this adventure will borrow elements from Rime of the Frostmaiden and Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Before we get into the media or the adventure, however, what is the domain of Zherisia? Well, Zherisia has such a lovely irrigation system. There isn't a single building that lacks internal plumbing, nor a single street without a grate or a manhole leading to the labyrinthine sewers below. It's therefore very strange how the people of Zherisia seem to fear it. For not only do the villagers lock their doors at night, staying inside at all costs, with the same desperation they stopper their water faucets, plug their bathtub drains, block off their sinks, and lock their toilet lids. There are too many rumors of families disappearing in the night, leaving only a bloodstain near the bathtub. There are too many rumors of the Hive Queen, who lurks in the tunnels below with her shape-changing brood. Meanwhile, by day, with attentive manners and faces tortured from the effort of maintaining forced smiles, Zherisia's villagers could not be friendlier. They can't wait to show you their humanity, to prove that they still have it. Okay, so Zherisia appears in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft for 5th edition D&D, and it is a domain of dread that is an amalgamation of previously established domains in 2nd and 3rd edition Ravenloft. These include the domain of Timor, which was sort of a underground sewer monster themed domain, Paradon, a domain that was sort of based around Jack the Ripper style slasher horror, and then Zherisia itself that had a doppelganger Dark Lord. These have all been blended together to form a composite domain in 5th edition that focuses on the idea of urban paranoia, the idea that cities are weird and monstrous just in their ordinary functionings, and also that beyond their ordinary functionings, there are some extraordinary ones beneath the surface, underground, in the sewers and the tunnels and so on. So, to get an imaginative grip on this domain, there are two sets of media that I want to cover. One set of media concerned with urban paranoia, to really get a grip on how it would feel to be in this place without going down into the sewers. And then a set of media which focus on the horrors of subterranean monsters and things that are down the drain and in the sewers and stuff like that. So first, urban paranoia. I want to begin with the 1919 short story by Franz Kafka called Ein altes Blatt, or An Old Manuscript, sometimes translated as An Old Chronicle or An Old Leaf. This is a very short parable by Kafka about the inability of civilized people to communicate with or interact with someone who is just disposed towards violence as such and cannot reason. It's a really weird tale, and like all of Kafka's tales, it focuses on being at the mercy of an inscrutable power or an inscrutable authority. In this case, though, it's city-going people who are at the mercy of barbarian raiders. It's described by the victims as a misunderstanding, which is quite funny. Highly recommended. Read that one. It's like 5 pages. Think on it. And I also recommend the 1956 short story by Jack Vance called The Phantom Milkman. This is a very interesting story. It manages to be both comedic and also horrific, and focusing on the idea of just not being able to cancel your subscription, like making a horror story out of that. That might sound strange, but Vance is an incredible writer, and I really enjoyed this little piece here. There's also the 1975 cult classic horror film, The Stepford Wives, which is based on the 1972 novel by Ira Levin, which, unfortunately, I haven't read. If anyone's read Levin's novel, The Stepford Wives, please tell me in the comments how it is, whether I should read it, whether it's worth my time. But the idea of being in the presence of people who are just a little too polite, a little too composed, just all too mechanically flush with the instructions that would come along with performing your job perfectly. There's something uncanny about that. The idea of an uncanny valley reached through perfect performance and politeness is something that I think you would find in Zherisia, as well as in The Stepford Wives, so check that one out as well. There's also a Shirley Jackson story called Nightmare, which was unfortunately published in 1997 posthumously. But it is an amazing story about paranoia in a city. It features a woman who is trying to deliver a package, and she's walking down the street from one area of a neighborhood to another, and everywhere she looks, she sees announcements and billboards and posters instructing people to find a person who is dressed exactly as she is dressed. And it says, "Find Miss X! Find Miss X! Can you find Miss X?" And it produces in our point of view character this incredible paranoia of being watched by everyone and being hunted for by everyone without there being a direct kind of hunt that's being described, like a violent action kind of thing. It's very dreamlike, and I really recommend reading it too. You might have heard about this story if you watched Super Eyepatch Wolf's video on social anxiety horror, because he mentions that there too. Nightmare by Shirley Jackson, I definitely recommend if you're thinking about urban paranoia and literary horror. And also do I recommend the 2003 story by Thomas Ligotti called The Town Manager. This story is a masterpiece, especially when you're thinking about the type of horror that you want to cultivate while you're in Zherisia, right? This is a Kafka-esque tale about a town whose citizens are at the mercy of some inscrutable manager that has the most unreasonable demands, but also the most coercive way of enforcing them. It's bleak, it's dreary, it's mysterious, it's funny, and this is the main inspiration for the adventure that we're going to sketch out later in this video. Most of the adventure that we're going to sketch out takes its story beats and its ideas from The Town Manager by Thomas Ligotti. You can find it in his anthology Teatro Grotesco, but it's really highly recommended. The Town Manager, we're going to draw on that a lot. There's also a 2009 short story by Michael Sisko called Modern Cities Exist Only to Be Destroyed. And this is a trip. First of all, it's a Michael Sisko piece, which means that you're going to get lots of overflowing, effusive, poetic language with really creative employments of unique verbs and adjectives and stuff. It's very, very, very rich in a rhetorical sense. But it's about this person who has an odd experience, first wondering about a panel in the wall in the subway tunnel, and then meeting some kind of hallucinatory person. And it's a very kind of dreary, paranoid fantasy on just an urban environment. And for that reason alone, if you're thinking about urban paranoia as the theme for your Ravenloft adventure, check that one out too. I also recommend The Suffering Clown by Nicole Cushing. It's printed in her collection of short stories called The Mirrors, and this is just a great short story for having a weird encounter in a dingy, grimy city that doesn't feel safe, but the lack of safety is more subtle and artful than just someone directly threatening you. This is a really clever tale, which at first I thought was a King in Yellow story, but after I was fortunate enough to have a quick chat with the author, it turns out, no, this isn't a King in Yellow story. If anything, it's inspired by other literature by Thomas Ligotti and stuff. So check out The Suffering Clown. Also, for urban paranoia, I have to recommend the 2023 film by Ari Aster, Beau is Afraid. I especially recommend the first 40 minutes. If you're thinking about how creepy a city can be, how alienating and gross and threatening it can feel, take a look at that film. Certainly at least the first 40 minutes. We're going to draw on that for part of our adventure too. And those are the works of literature I recommend for getting an imaginative grip on the sort of urban paranoia that I would use for the theme of the Ravenloft Domain of Zherisia. Take a look at these sources. Now, Zherisia also has a bunch of subterranean monsters in the sewers. They're a hive of disgusting, spidery organisms, and they're led by some shape-changing creature called the Hive Queen. And in order to get an imaginative grip on that, there's a few other different sources of media that I want to mention. And to begin with, I want to mention stuff about Hollow Earth and the idea of the Hollow Earth theory and paranoia about that. I would take a look at maybe the last 6 chapters of Edgar Allan Poe's only novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, and pay attention to the eeriness and the weirdness of the caverns they find beneath the earth just toward the end, and how strange things are toward the pole. There's some cool stuff there that you might draw upon in terms of general paranoia of what lies beneath. There's also a bunch of stuff about the Shaver mystery that's worth reading about. Richard Sharp Shaver was a mentally distressed man who, for most of his life, perpetuated the earnest belief that there are underground civilizations beneath the earth populated by creatures that are hell-bent on our suffering and destruction. These creatures behave robotically, and they're detrimental to us. So Shaver called them the Dero, or detrimental robots, and that's actually where we get the D&D monster, the Dero, from, interestingly enough. And this is kind of a conspiracy theory that took the American populace by storm right before the American populace decided to be obsessed with flying saucers instead. So, like, stuff about the Shaver mystery is worth reading about if you're interested in paranoia and the fear of the subterranean and things like that. I would suggest reading about the Shaver mystery rather than reading actual Shaver mystery stories. You could read, The Man from Mars, right? This is a book about the life of Ray Palmer, the sleazy exploiter that, took Shaver's mysteries and sort of popularized them. And then there's the 2013 book by Richard Toronto called War Over Lemuria. You could read that. I guess if there's any one Shaver mystery story that you might want to read just to know what they are, you could take a look at the 1945 piece by Shaver called Thought Records of Lemuria, published in Amazing Stories. Don't say I didn't warn you. These things are terrible. It's a fascinating period of the history of fiction to read about, but the works that constitute that period of history aren't necessarily as enjoyable, I would say. Really, if you wanted some Shaver mystery type fiction with a bit of artistic integrity, I would take a look at The Letter E. I read it at the start of this video in Harlan Ellison's alphabetical work From A to Z in the Chocolate Alphabet, published in 1976, as well as the first few entries in a creepypasta series from the early 2000s called The Holders. The very first entry is called The Holder of the End. It's a creepypasta called The Holder of the End. If you read that one and a few after it, you'll start to get a kind of paranoid feel, which is what I think Shaver mystery stuff is going for when it aims at horror rather than like sci-fi schlock and fantastical nonsense. There's also a 2004 Japanese horror film called Marabito that is directed by Takashi Miike. That's right, the audition guy. This film is controversial. Not everybody likes it because it's clearly shot in a low-budget indie sort of way with a minimal camera technology and stuff. But it is a fascinating sort of vampire story that draws heavily from ideas from the Shaver mystery and the Darrow and the fear of there being a secret underground world that has a malevolent relationship to us and stuff like that. So you might want to check out Marabito too. And as for the actual monsters that are beneath the sewers and in the tunnels of Zherisia's sewer system, I would recommend two sources. First, the classic horror film from 1979 directed by Ridley Scott, Alien. As far as how the monsters look and act and reproduce and behave in the setting of Zherisia, make them as much like the alien from that film as you please. It's a really great place to start. And if you're thinking about action beats and beats of storytelling and combat, I would take a look at a couple of issues of the Uncanny X-Men from 1981, which focus on some antagonists called the Brood. And the Brood are basically just xenomorphs from Alien, except for they have infested Earth sewers and the X-Men have to fight them. You can find them in Uncanny X-Men numbers 161 through 163, which was drawn by Chris Claremont and written by Dave Cockrum. Then there's number 167, and then Uncanny X-Men 232 to 234, which was, again, drawn by Chris Claremont and written by Mark Silvestri. The Alien from the Alien franchise and the Brood from the Uncanny X-Men, those are basically what the creatures below Zherisia's sewers are like. So feel free to draw from those media as well. And finally, when it comes to other official sources about these Ravenloft domains or about the domains that make up Zherisia, I recommend Colin McComb and Scott Benny's 1992 supplement, Islands of Terror. This contains an entry for Timor, one of the domains from 2nd edition that makes up Zherisia in the 5th edition, as well as Bruce Nesmith and Lisa Smedman's adventure, The Hour of the Knife, which takes place in another domain that comes to make up Zherisia in 5th edition. The Hour of the Knife is a fun, sort of paranoid Jack the Ripper style adventure where the PCs are murdered off screen and replaced with doppelgangers one by one until they are all forced to serve Sodo, the then Dark Lord of that particular domain. It's pretty cool. Also, it's no secret now, I love every single adventure that Lisa Smedman has written. They're all just great. And Bruce Nesmith, excellent. You really can't go wrong with this one. Okay, with imaginative media out of the way, let's sketch out this adventure. In Act 1, at level 5, the PCs are deposited in the domain of Zherisia in the village of Paradon. This is a foggy, London-like village, and the PCs don't know where they are or how they got there. They soon learn that there's something very wrong with the place, however, and they witness a horrific transition in town leadership. In Act 2, at level 6, the PCs are horrifically forced to vandalize part of the town, and they learn a little bit more about the town's horrifying, deep nature. And finally, in Act 3, at level 7, the PCs are forced to descend into the depths of the town's sewers and confront the real master of the town. It's a very quick summary, so let's get into this in detail, shall we? In Act 1, at level 5, the PCs find themselves in a misty, London-esque city. It's full of multi-story buildings and fog, perhaps there's even a big tower with a clock in it. And in the distance, the PCs might be able to hear the sound of a trolley. As for the villagers, they're all polite. Too polite. Extremely polite and also avoidant in their politeness. It's as if they're putting on some kind of performance to act like the absolute perfect neighbors and to be in a hurry to excuse themselves as quickly as possible. Insight checks should reveal that everyone seems to be afraid of something. Unfortunately, no matter how one attempts, you're not going to get these villagers to reveal what they're afraid of. Under no circumstances will any of the villagers relax and willingly engage in honest discourse. Now, as is typical of a Ravenloft adventure, the PCs cannot leave the village of Paradon once they arrive. If they wander into the mists or into the fog, they'll soon find themselves moving back the way that they thought they were going. It seems they're trapped, at least for now. The DM should note that everything in this city is immaculately clean. From the pitted cobbles of the streets, to the sidewalks, to the buildings themselves, to the glass which shimmers and sparkles, there's not a speck of dust on anything. Furthermore, there's an abundance of sewer grates and manhole covers and fountains everywhere, which suggests that this place has a very advanced irrigation system, probably one that extends into the buildings themselves. Indoor plumbing, perhaps? Investigation would confirm this. Now, for a map, you could use a map of just about any city. The one thing that you want to include is a street trolley, which runs either along the edge of or through the center of town. You want there to be a trolley, and you want it to be the only normal-looking or really friendly and inviting element of the city. The trolley should be fun to ride, pleasant to stand on, and the conductor, a man named Tom, spelled T-H-O-M, is one of the only villagers who talks to the PCs in an easy, breezy kind of way. He doesn't just divulge everything about the town or give up all of its secrets or anything, but he is willing to act more friendly and honest. The trolley should come across as nice and welcoming, a bit of salvation or refuge in this otherwise hostile, paranoid place. After talking to them for a while, Tom will confess that this town is not safe, not at all. He says that monsters stalk the streets at night, and they can change shape so you can never tell where they are or what they look like. You need to be inside after nightfall. He adds that the town is ruled by a town manager. The method of appointing these managers is unknown, and nobody ever sees or talks to or interacts with the town manager directly. The town manager's presence is only known because of the illumination in the building where they are said to stay, a building labeled with a sign that says Town Manager. If the PCs ask about any other arrangement for running a village, anything from democracy to dictatorship or whatever, Tom seems confused. Their town has always been run this way. There's always been some town manager appointed mysteriously by unknown parties who has total control over the town, who delivers messages mysteriously without addressing anyone directly, and everyone obeys. That's just how the town is run. It's likely that the PCs will have quite a few things to say about this, and you can have some fun world building with their back and forth and discussion. And the PCs can also interact with other paranoid villagers, have fun riding the trolley, exploring the place. And they can even find a building with a sign that says Town Manager, which seems to be locked and sealed up and inaccessible. If the PCs ever try to lift a manhole cover or sewer grate, they discover that they've been welded shut, and it seems that you can't get in. Eventually, should the PCs need to take a long rest, they can find an inn called the Two Crosses. Get it? Double cross? Like treachery? The owner of the Two Cross Inn is a man named Ritter. He's gruff and guarded, but he's willing to put the PCs up for a rather high price. Something that's a little bit more pricey than an inn that the PCs are used to. Now, the next morning, when the PCs exit the inn, when they exit the Two Crosses, they find that the entire town seems to have assembled in the street. They all have the same concern, which is that the light has gone out in the town manager's office. This usually means that the town manager is dead, but you need to confirm that sort of thing to make sure, and confirming that sort of thing is a very dangerous affair. The townspeople beseech the PCs if they can go into the town manager's office, venture in, and confirm for sure that the town manager is dead within its depths. The villagers beg, and they make all kinds of promises, most of which are insincere, but they're willing to say almost anything to get the PCs to go and investigate whether the town manager is dead. They are genuinely afraid, and they do genuinely want to know. So insight checks would reveal that there's no dishonesty in their attempt to get the PCs to go. They're not trying to trick the PCs into danger or anything like that, even if they're not really fond of the PCs being in their community. Now, assuming the PCs agree, have them enter the town manager's office, and then run the Lost Spire of the Netherreal from Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. Replace all references to the Netherreal with references to things like the Queen, and the Hive, and the Kingdom Below, vague things like that. Also, remove the white, remove the simulacrum, and remove their associated quests. We don't need those. Absolutely make sure that you keep the fact that everything is upside down. That is delightfully creepy. And with no reason, with no explanation for why everything is upside down, this should strike the PCs as horrifying in a really unique way. Keep the upside-downness of everything. And where the simulacrum and the white are, replace them with a half-dozen carionettes from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, along with a humanoid skeleton that's all decayed, but it's wearing a sash that says Town Manager. There's the confirmation. And once the PCs have found that and confirmed that and killed the carionettes, replace the bugbear encounter at the very end with an encounter with 3 doppelgangers. Let the doppelgangers show up, they're disguised, they look like villagers, but then at the earliest opportunity they transform and surprise the PCs. Fighting to the death, of course. Now, when the PCs leave the old town manager's office, mysteriously, somehow, the whole day has passed. It has become dusk, and the villagers have dispersed. Now, if the PCs don't run to the 2 crosses inn immediately, they risk being locked out after dark, at which point they're going to have to make some serious ability checks in order to try to get in. And if they can't, they're going to have to gain a level of exhaustion from staying out all night, not being able to get any secure rest. For if the PCs stay out all night, they're periodically attacked by trios of doppelgangers and small gangs of carrion stalkers. At the start of next morning, the PCs reach level 6, and we proceed to Act 2. At the start of Act 2, at level 6, the PCs once again find the entire town gathered outside in the morning, concerned and wondering what the PCs found. Is the old town manager indeed dead? And what do they do now? Any news on a new town manager? Should the PCs accuse the villagers of being doppelgangers, the villagers will show a mixture of fright and disgust and disappointment, and even pity. They will agree that the PCs must have been attacked by some of the monsters that come out at dusk and that stay out all night. The villagers implore the PCs to recognize that they are villagers, not monsters, and they also implore the PCs to tell them every detail of what they found inside the old town manager's office. Now, once the PCs have finished telling the villagers whatever they feel like telling them, they should notice a brief glimmer of light shining up for a moment from every sewer grate and manhole. Investigation reveals that somehow, suddenly, on every manhole and sewer grate, the crude letters, Town Manager, have been carved. The grates and manhole covers are still welded shut, cannot be opened, but it appears to be a signal that the new town manager has already been appointed. And right next to the first manhole cover or grate that the PCs notice, there's a large crumpled piece of brown paper. If the PCs uncrumple it, they see a crude, misspelled message, a command, painstakingly rendered in all caps, despite its misspelling. Just 2 words. Destroy trolley. D-U-S-T-R-O-Y space T-R-O-L-Y. Destroy trolley. If the PCs don't pick this up and read it, someone else will and reveal it to the PCs. The message disturbs the village a great deal. The trolley, after all, is like the only enjoyable thing about the entire town. It's clear the villagers don't really want to follow this order. And here the PCs can deliberate about this. If they ask Tom, or if they ask Ritter, or if they ask any of the villagers, they learn that normally the villagers always obey the orders from the town manager. Always. But this order seems strangely unnecessary and cruel. There's a lot of hesitation for the very first time about the orders from a manager. And you can let some time pass. If some time passes without the PCs or anyone else trying to follow these instructions, the PCs will find Tom's dead, naked body in the street later, and on Tom's torso is carved the words, Destroy Trolley. D-U-S-T-R-O-Y space T-R-O-L-Y. If the PCs still ignore the command, they don't set about destroying the trolley immediately, let other dead, naked villagers' carcasses show up in the street, all carved with the misspelled phrases, Destroy Trolley, Destroy Trolley, Destroy Trolley. At no point can the perpetrators of these horrific crimes ever be found, either during the act or afterwards. The victims just show up. Now, should the PCs begin dismantling the trolley, it immediately starts smoking and smoldering and jumps off of the track. It attacks the PCs as though it were an animate being defending itself. Use these statistics for a Clockwork Oaken Bolter, giving it maximum hit points, 3 uses of legendary resistance, and also 3 uses of legendary action, which it can spend either moving without provoking an attack of opportunity or making an attack. I would also flavor its harpoons as being sections of rail and track that the thing picks up and throws at the PCs. That's pretty cool. Now, shortly after the PCs destroy Trolley, they find another scrap of crumpled brown paper with further orders scrawled in crude all-caps misspelled Ashen script. This second note says, "Good, now your jobs will change." Certainly a foreboding message. And sure enough, when the PCs turn their attentions back to the town of Paradon, they find that somehow, quickly, miraculously, it's changed in a very disturbing way. All the usual signs and notices have been removed and replaced with really disturbing signs instead. The signs say things like, "Death, death, death," and "Cut your hands off for 20 copper." Some say, "Get perverted in the Comfort Castle," or just the word "filth." Think of all the signs and background notices in the first 40 minutes of the film Beau is Afraid by Ari Aster. In particular, the PCs should find that the 2 crosses in has been replaced with something called the Comfort Castle. Out front, poor Ritter is dressed in baby clothes fitted for an adult, including a diaper, and it looks like he's selling paper cups of what looks like bouillon. In order to get inside, the PCs have to pay at least 6 gold each, and once they go inside, they find that it's nothing but a winding maze leading to dead ends, and at each dead end, there's a non-functioning toilet. Other venues are even worse. Sometimes you pay a huge fee to go inside, only to be bombarded with the sounds of bloodshed and fighting, and the smell of sewage. Should the PCs attempt to disrupt anything or ask too many questions, they are suddenly set upon by gangs of doppelgangers, 3 at a time, who attack the PCs savagely and fight to the death. In each case, besides their weapons, they're only carrying one thing, a stack of brochures that say, "Have a fun time in Funny Town." It's written in the same script as the orders from the town manager. After the PCs have experimented and explored, and specifically after they've gotten into 3 fights, gotten attacked 3 times, they level up to 7, and we proceed to Act 3. In Act 3, once the PCs have reached level 7, the DM should be a bit more permissive in letting the PCs find a way into the sewer. They may have had good ideas before, which you have had to rule out because everything is welded shut, or it seems as if there's an enchantment on this grate, or something like that. Let there be a lapse in that detail here. Allow the PCs to make some checks, or allow them to try some plans which would get them into the sewers, because that's where they're going next. It's about time. Time to confront this town manager. And to set the PCs on this task, you might even have Ritter or some other villager beg the PCs to do this. And before they go in, the PCs are warned by villagers to be careful. There are supposed to be countless monsters of incredible power down there. They should probably focus their efforts on sneaking, stealth, subterfuge, find their way to the Hive Queen, kill the Hive Queen, and then come back alive. Seek not to destroy the legions of those below, just their leadership. They give the PCs some meager supplies, what little they have, and then bid them Godspeed on their journey. Now, once the PCs go down into the sewer, we're going to run the adventure The Final Enemy from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, except we're going to change a couple of things. First, and most disgustingly, it's not seawater that fills the lower levels of this dungeon. No. Instead, it's a mixture of, well, rain, mist condensation, and wastewater. It's gross. You should feel free to let it cause a bit of poison damage over time. Not too much. Don't turn it into like hot lava or anything. But make sure you keep to that detail, that this isn't ocean water down there. Second, keep all the Sahuagin enemies the same, but redescribe their appearance, reskin them, as it were. Instead of describing them as fish people or fish humanoids, describe them as being oily, slimy, semi-skeletal, blackish purple creatures with jaws inside of jaws, but no visible eyes anywhere. Yes, I'm saying describe them like H.R. Geiger's or H.R. Giger's Alien. Third, whenever PCs find any survivors, they horrifically burst open and a few carrion stalkers come out of their chests, like in Alien. No human beings down here can be rescued. Each prisoner or victim is just an incubation chamber for carrion stalkers. And speaking of which, fourth, describe all the shell sharks as looking like overgrown carrion stalkers, as if this is some kind of mature phase in their development. Again, keep the statistics the same, just describe the shell sharks as looking like those carrion stalkers. And fifth, and finally, let the Hive Queen be the High Priestess of Sekolah. That's the one monster down here that the PCs need to kill in order to complete the adventure. As for the rest, it's the same as in the final enemy. The PC should mostly be trying stealth and subterfuge and avoiding combat rather than jumping in and trying to clear every room of monsters. If they try to just jump in and clear every room of monsters, they might actually get killed. And so, try to warn them in-universe through the language of the NPCs as much as you can. But once the PCs have defeated the Hive Queen, the adventure should wind down to a close. And there are a couple of ways to do this. You might just have an earthquake break out and a rumbling, and the sewer tunnels fill with Ravenloft mist, and as the PCs try to escape, they flee into the mist only to be whisked away somewhere else. Or you could have some funny Twilight Zone ending, maybe, where the PCs do escape back to the surface to an applauding crowd of villagers who all suddenly burst into laughter and reveal themselves to be doppelgangers and then chase the PCs out of the village into the mist, or something like that. Or do you have another way to end this adventure? Another spooky sort of twist in tone? Let me know in the comments. That is our Zherisia adventure. What do you think? Are you disappointed that I didn't involve the Dark Lord c.h.u.d, the doppelganger? He is an old character from 2nd edition Ravenloft after all. If you would have involved him, how? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. As always, do all the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want notifications on updates on this channel. And thanks!